welcome to Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross. I am your host and resource for self-care, connections, and collaborations. And today we have Jill Sitnick of The Journey Sage with us. And she is here to share her journey of some past traumas and how she has found solace from those traumas through psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Yeah, psychedelic, that's a mouthful. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. Jill's compelling story is one of triumph over adversity. So without further ado, I would love for you guys to all meet Jill Sitnick. Jill, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh my gosh, Laura, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a fascinating subject. You start to hear more about psychedelics, and I know a lot of people have, traumas, and especially the PTSD part. So Can you tell me what catalyzed that turning point in your journey towards the MDMA assisted therapy?
Yeah, so I did not know I had PTSD from childhood abuse. I was with my partner, Carl, for more than 20 years. And when he passed, about 18 months after his passing, I had a massive panic attack that was brought on by a work email that was like level 1. But my body and my mind responded like it was a level 10. I kind of joke around, but at the time I saw this one email as I was going to lose my job. I was never going to be able to get another job. I was going to lose my house. I was going to be ultimately living in my car. I just had this doomsday sense and this feeling of nothing I can do is going to be able to save me, all from a work email. So
Wow.
I had worked with a therapist to help me with my grief work. And I went back to her and I just said, I don't understand. 90 to 95% of my body is saying that I'm in immediate danger. The world is going to crash down on me right now. And 5% in my head is saying, that's not going to happen. But my body, at this point, when I went to go see her, I was a couple of months into this kind of panic and I was exhausted. I was borderline suicidal. And so she said, let's take a look at what your body's trying to tell you. And I'm like, what my body's trying to tell you? What are you talking about? But it wound up that when I actually settled and focused on my very straight back or my shoulders that were like up to my ears and my upset stomach, I was remembering childhood instances where I felt those physical sensations. And that's when I learned that trauma lives in the body until it's healed. And ultimately, I'll shorten the story. Ultimately, my therapist was in a program to become a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist. And she said, look, you absolutely have PTSD from your childhood. Go over to MAPS.org, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. They are the ones who are running the clinical trials for MDMA, for PTSD. They have the breakthrough therapy designation with the FDA. And if you'd like to pursue this therapy, we can move forward. And it was an absolute turning point in my life. And so that's kind of the summary of where the PTSD came from, my childhood, how it kind of evidenced itself very, very front and center, and then how I kind of fell into this therapy.
So all the signs in your body and the signals. So was it kind of like repressed memories, or like you wouldn't have known anything was wrong in your childhood, but it was like coming out now?
That is a fabulous question. I always knew I had a bad childhood. I won't curse. I used to usually put a curse in front of that. I never talked about my childhood. I didn't talk to my father for most of my adulthood. I always knew it wasn't good. My mother was depressed and suicidal. There were drugs and there was food insecurity. There was housing insecurity. But I also knew on some level that lots of other people had it way worse. So I think I kind of discounted it. But then also, I had a lovely relationship for more than 20 years, and that relationship regulated my nervous system. It really wasn't until he was gone and the widow's fog had started to dissipate a bit that my body's signals, I no longer had any sort of external reassurance that everything was going to be okay. And all of that trauma and all the kind of symptoms that I probably have had my whole life, but had someone I could rely on to tell me everything's going to be okay, without that kind of linchpin, that's the term, without that kind of stability,
Right.
the trauma just didn't have anywhere else to go other than to say here kind of thing.
So basically it was something you buried and you felt okay and safe until that left. And then it just kind of, wow.
Yeah. In my instance, there were never any thing. Some people talk about, they have suddenly they remember things they hadn't remembered for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't my instance. I had all of my memories. I just hadn't thought about them in
You
30
just buried them.
years. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
An
In a sense, you
actual
just bury them.
and
Yeah.
major symptom of PTSD is not talking about bad things. And I didn't know that. I just thought, nobody really wants to hear about suicides and drugs and beatings, at the work functions or things like that, So I just always I white lied my way with my family stuff throughout my entire life.
Well, and there's different reasons a lot of times why people don't want to talk to them. Either, they maybe feel weak, or they maybe, they feel ashamed, or, I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. But the thing is, I think it's good when people do talk about it, because there's others that are struggling out there that can hear and relate to that, to say, I'm not alone in this. Someone else is experiencing the same thing.
Right.
So
Right.
you went yourself through the psychedelic treatment. Can you walk us through kind of the experience of an MDMA therapeutic session, and from your unique perspective, what it does?
Oh, absolutely. So MDMA is a synthetic compound. It has a big giant name that I would never be able to pronounce in a million years. And it is basically, and I'm not a doctor, so I'm giving you like the 3,000-foot definition of MDMA. It's an empathogen. It makes you, as a trauma patient, it makes you much more empathetic towards yourself, towards situations in your life. It calmed my body down so that during my very first session, I took the 2 capsules. That just happened to be my dosage. Proper dosage is important. And what happened to me was that my body calmed down enough that I was finally able to hear my inner voice, which I had never actually heard my inner voice before, because I was like always so fight and flight. And in addition, for the first time in my life, I was able to explain to my doctor and my therapist and my guide. And my guide is a medical doctor, so that's why I always get the terms confused. But basically, my therapist and my guide, who's a medical doctor, I was able to explain to them for the first time in my life how scared I was of my father, in a very calm, rational, without my body freaking out. Like, I was absolutely sure that if my father had been in that room, his hands would have been around my throat. And as calmly as I'm able to say that now, for the first time in my life, I was able to express those fears that calmly without my body getting in the way. And so during the session, it can go from 5 to 7 to 8 hours, depending on the dosage, your weight, how much trauma, what you've eaten that day, that kind of stuff. But the integration afterwards was the same way. I would remember childhood memories, but my body would stay relaxed. And instead of thinking of those memories of like what they were like from a child's point of view, how a toddler would feel about her father beating her up, suddenly I'm in my late 40s remembering this and saying, wait a minute. The universe is not against that little girl. There's nothing wrong with that little girl. She's certainly enough. This is just an instance of an abusive parent. And so MDMA during the session and the integration afterwards, which can be days, weeks, and in my instance, months, it calms. And I always do this. I know I always do this because like I think my shoulders were around my ears my entire life. So it calms the body down to let you see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, and they always say that, you might say one thing, but your your body language will tell a whole other story. And a lot of people have a lot of neck and shoulder pain because if you're tensed and you don't realize you've even got them up there, and it's just a whole totally different
Right.
feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I should also say, I had tried ecstasy, which MDMA's street name, ecstasy Molly. I had tried ecstasy once in my life. I was kind of a newbie going into this, and
Mhm.
I had all of the stereotypes around the visuals and, the egg in the frying pan, and it couldn't have been anything. It was the complete opposite. It was like a deep breath. It was like my body could finally breathe and I could finally start to process things.
So would you say that was your kind of an emotional resonance, that you observed while you're under that therapy, is just kind of the calmness and the fact that you can, you don't get in that whole panic mode or the fight and flight? Or what shifts in your perspective and your emotional resonance, do you think, did you observe when you're under it?
So for me, when I'm in an enhanced state, I don't remember much of it. I mean, to be completely candid, my first journey, and I had 3 therapeutic journeys over the course of a year to then no longer
Mm-hmm.
qualify for a PTSD diagnosis. I only really remember snippets. So maybe a half an hour to 45-ish minutes of the entire 5 to 7 to 8 hour journey. So it's really
Wow.
hard to say how I felt at the time. Certain images absolutely stand out. But what I'll say, and one of the things I talk about, which is mildly controversial, I don't really see it as controversial at all of my journeys were voice recorded on my phone. So I was able to go back later on, except for one of them where we had a little bit of a tech glitch, but we won't talk about that one. I was
It
able to
comes with
listen.
technology. We have that.
It came with technology. It was
Yeah.
a day. So for 2 of my journeys, I'm able to go back and read the transcripts and see how my brain was working and see what limiting beliefs I had and where my shame was. So I would say for anybody who is, thinking about this therapy moving forward, consider the voice recording part of it, so that you can go back, because if you're anything like me, you're not really going to remember the specifics of most of the journey.
So that kind of brings up another question then. Was that challenge back into that fight or flight from hearing what you were experiencing and going through, since you didn't remember it? Or
Oh, that's a fabulous question. I was not. I listened to the transcript after the first journey. I dove into the transcript like the day after, just kind of, I wanted to see I wanted to know about it. I was so curious about how my brain worked. The effects, I don't understand exactly how MDMA continues to keep the body calm, but that was my experience. So, like the next day, the next week, kind of going through the transcript did not. No, I wasn't experiencing this.
I was just curious because a lot of times, even just doing this stuff, it's like, you need to watch to see where you can improve, but it's like you really don't want to hear yourself talk. But that's a whole different experience. I was just kind of curious because, especially if you're talking about traumas, if you don't remember it, who knows what was coming up? But I guess probably curiosity, and that's the only way you would know. So that's why I was curious.
So I can speak from 2020 experience now. Like if you were asking me immediately after the first journey, I might not be able to answer this as well. But with 2020 hindsight experience, when I was in an enhanced state is
Mhm.
where there was a good bit of wisdom that I was able to make connections under the enhanced state. For instance, that I I didn't deserve to be beaten when I was a child. I didn't deserve to be thrown out of houses multiple times in my life. Things of that sort. And I'm just like doing surface level stuff. Um, you're able to kind of reading the transcripts allows you to see the patterns that your mind has made, and only because the MDMA kind of opens you up. So, or opened me up, I should say. So, no, I found reading the transcripts to be incredibly enlightening. Like, oh my gosh, you're right. That is a pattern. That is how I think.
So would you say that's kind of what led to your healing, or is there more to that, the reframing process of that traumatic memories under the MDMA therapy?
So that's the magic of the healing. So you know how somebody, you can tell a story about your life and somebody else can say, like, maybe you had something really embarrassing and somebody
Mm-hmm.
else can say, hey, Laura, no big deal. Like, there's a tomorrow, you can get up and do it again, but you still feel that embarrassment. Like, it's really not that easy to let go of.
Right.
MDMA, the day, week, month after, it almost allowed me, I like to say that it was like a TV show. It's actually one of my favorite analogies. It allowed me to see my childhood like it was a playing on a TV. And of course, in my head, I've got like the old 70s console TVs that like my parents
Mm-hmm.
had. Like, that's always what I imagine, right? Being able to see the event on TV, meaning my emotions are separated from it, and being able to realize from an adult perspective what's really happening versus from a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old. Those children's perspectives are based on age and they're not based on the real reality that an adult knows. Going through those memories, journaling about them, questioning them. Like, my mother attempted suicide multiple times in her life. When I was 5, she tried to kill herself by shooting herself. I remember walking in on the bathroom vividly. I remember the ambulance. I remember being stuck at the neighbor's house. I remember all of those things. Before the MDMA therapy, there was this deep sense of being alone and being abandoned. Well, looking at those memories after MDMA, I can very much see how much pain my mother was in. She wasn't trying to leave me. She wasn't abandoning me. She was trying to escape a horrific marriage. I mean, just horrific. And so that reframing is the healing. And it's kind of a wisdom that you get to kind of look at your life and say, oh, those emotions that I had then, I understand why that child would have had those emotions, but that's not really how it went down. This is really the situation. And it just pulls the emotion out of it. The event still happened. My memory is fully intact. Yes, it wasn't great, but it no longer controls me at a subconscious level. I no longer have that deep sense of abandonment. It made
Yeah.
sense in my head. How'd that come
No,
out?
no, no, no. It makes perfect sense. No,
Okay.
and we all have different perspectives and different things. So, how do
Yeah.
you navigate the potential stigma and misconceptions of that are tied to the assisted psychotherapy? That's a
Psychedelics.
I want to just call it PEP, but we all know that stands for something else. But I'm like, that's a lot of words. But how do you navigate that? Sorry, that just popped in.
No, you know what? It's too many syllables. And it's on the front of it's on the front of my book. And like, even me, that I have to type it every single time. So look, to be absolutely candid with you, after my third journey, when I got out of my third journey, I was very much aware that I had done some amazing work. I had actually freed an inner 5-year-old that in my subconscious was still stuck in that house. And she was dying very slowly. That's where the kind of the suicide stuff was coming from. And as I was coming out of my enhanced state, I said to my doctor and my guide, uh, this needs to be clearer. Not this, I'm sorry. This therapy needs to be clearer. There are so many stereotypes around psychedelics. All the stereotypes, this therapy is the complete opposite from everything that I had been media fed about what psychedelics were. And more importantly, the fact that it worked. Because I'll be honest with you, I had been on Wellbutrin, I had done meditation retreats. My level of trauma at a PTSD level just needed more intense therapy than those particular avenues had provided for me. And so, because it had worked for me, because of my background as a teacher, as an English teacher too, I always knew there was a book in me somewhere. I just felt a deep sense of gratitude that I was able to access this therapy underground. Let's be candid. It worked. I had literally no longer looked at my future as like a black tunnel. I was looking at my future with blue skies. And I said, if I don't do something, I have the advantage to be able to communicate about what this therapy is, what this therapy isn't. And I just felt it was my responsibility. So I wrote the book. I wanted the book to really focus on the therapy. My editor said, you have to tell them a little bit about you, Jill, or else it's not going to make sense. So I did that. And then I had the pleasure of going to a psychedelic retreat in Mexico years later. And I saw that people were really struggling because they didn't have a doctor and a guide kind of working with them and explaining everything. So I wrote the workbook to kind of have people give people an idea of what to expect, and they get to use the 8 kind of prompts that my therapist and I used. Like, it's literally like almost having my therapist in a book with you. And then I had a couple other things in my life shuffle, and I had the opportunity to create this YouTube channel to answer questions. And at this point, the FDA is set to approve this therapy in 2024, and we're going to see a lot of marketing and a lot of clinics. I'm going to use the word clinic. I don't even know if that's going to be the right term. And I just thought that a patient's voice, somebody who had gone through it and isn't looking to, market a program or anything, I thought would be valuable to help folks out. So that's pretty much why I'm here. I get to put my educator hat on. I was an English teacher at the very beginning of my career, so I get to do that again.
Yeah. And I know we have a lot more to dive into, especially about your YouTube channel and the stuff that you're doing to help others understand more about that, because it is a fascinating thing. And I'm glad that you've been able to find relief, but we do need to take a quick break from our sponsors, and we will be right back.
Hi, I'm Bobby Aldridge with BAM Metrics. There are so many programs out there that measure your swing speed, sets, reps, your BMI, your body fat, but the one thing they're not measuring that's so essential is mobility. Mobility is the key. If you're measuring your mobility, your performance will get better and you will reduce your pain. I created BAM Metrics to make it easy for people to repeat the exercises so they could do it properly at home on their own. It's simple, it's easy to do, and from a senior to a pro athlete.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm a Dharma Master. I teach Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy. What kind of Qigong do we teach? Well, it helps you to get your mind into your body and your breath very quickly. We really start off with quite quick movements to help cater for the busy Western mind, coming into stretching out the meridians, waking up the chakra system and the danjons, coming into Jigan meditation, which helps you to really focus on the energy in and around your body, bringing you into that beautiful calm state where you can sit and meditate really easily, whereas maybe before you found it really difficult. So Qigong at the Bright Beings Academy will help you get more in touch with yourself.
Hi there, my name is Jill Sitnick, and I healed my childhood trauma-induced PTSD with psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And since the FDA is set to approve this therapy in 2024, I've created some resources to help people understand what this therapy is. I wrote a memoir detailing my healing experience, a workbook for people who are looking to get started, and an educational YouTube channel that answers the questions I get the most. If you or someone you know is suffering from PTSD, head on over to thejourneysage.com, where I have information and resources to help you understand this therapy more.
And we are back. So you already started to touch on it a little bit, but how instrumental was your background in education technology in creating the Journey Sage platform?
Huge. So I laugh. So I started my career as an English teacher. Then I was a supervisor of technology in a school district. Then I went to big tech. I went to Microsoft, and then ended my big tech stint at Amazon. And so educational technology, and my master's degree is educational technology. And so to be candid, the YouTube channel is fun for me. I mean, once I got over the hurdle of kind of figuring out video editing and things of that sort, to me, I get to teach. With my videos, I take the different subjects. I try to answer the questions that, number one, I get, and number two, the questions that I had. And I get to do little mini lessons on YouTube. So I'm really enjoying that outlet right now.
Well, I guess from education and loving to teach, so you're kind of probably used to being in front of people. I know for me, when I started, everybody's like, "Oh, you should do this, you should do this," and then you're trying to do shorts, and you got this like camera like right in your face. I'm like, and you're looking at yourself talking. It was kind of the weirdest thing to get over. So
Yeah,
I was just kind of curious how that went for you.
I do miss seeing the light bulbs. I will admit the best part about teaching is the response from people who are being taught. I do miss that. But I'm starting to get the comments, so I know I'm reaching people, and people are reaching out to me on my website. So they are seeing it, which is good. It's good stuff.
That is awesome, and we need to put that up too, because we also need to know. TheJourneySage.com is the website we are referring to. But so how has intention setting, integration practices, and working with the journey guides enhanced your own healing process?
So. Psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, or MDMA therapy for PTSD, is not turnkey. It is not a quick fix. It's not one pill and you're done. It is a process. And so for all three journeys pretty much followed, and I was an English teacher, but I figured out these percentages: 40, 20, and 40. So 40% of the time, think of each journey cycle. 40% of the time is the talk therapy before the journey, where you're thinking about what you need to heal, what's bothering you, what intentions you want to set for your journey. Setting for psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is super important. What your mindset is going in, and feeling safe at the location with the people who are treating you. So 40% talk therapy, figuring out my intentions. Most of my intentions dealt with fear. So as a child of abuse, my underlying foundation was, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, the universe is after me. There was this huge amount of fear. With those intentions, then going into the therapeutic journey that day, that's 20%. So it's a significant, but it's not the most significant. It's literally one day of the entire process. The next 40%, we got to hit 100. The next 40% is the integration. And the easiest way I can think of explaining integration is like physical therapy. Like the journey day itself is your medical procedure, because I had a prescribed dose of MDMA. And then the days, weeks, months after, the physical therapy, the integration. And that's where, as long as I took the time to give my brain space to kind of think and process and look at my childhood and journal, and very importantly, to repeat. The same way that we learn through repetition is the same way that we unlearn some of our trauma through repetition. And I was really like harsh on myself. Like, why am I writing about this same memory 10, 15, 20 times in my journal? Because that's how our brains rewire ourselves. So intentions in the very beginning, talk therapy, 40%, journey day, 20% with the prescribed psychedelic, in my instance, MDMA, and then the last 40%, the integration. And the integration can go anywhere from 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. For me, as we were going through the year, and I say we, my therapist and I would say I would be like ending the integration of one journey while also getting prepared and talking about getting ready for another one. I knew that when there were memories or feelings that I couldn't reframe or I couldn't release, that's when my body was telling me I was ready for another journey. So that's why I say this is not turnkey. It really did take 3 times, just the way the research says that it normally takes 3 times. And it could take more for other people, or it could take 2 for certain people, but it's at the level of trauma that I had, definitely not just a turnkey one journey situation.
Right. And I'm sure other people might even take longer depending on how deep or how bad that trauma was.
Absolutely. As of right now, I don't think there should be no judgment placed on how someone processes their trauma, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you might have touched on this a little bit, but I mean, what really did inspire you to put that pen down and to do the raw experiences, other than the person saying, you need to kind of share this because you want people to be able to relate to it when you were writing In Rescuing Jill? And, what do you hope for your readers to take away from that?
That this works, that this is a viable solution. So to be completely candid, my mother was clinically depressed her entire life and was on a litany of medications and talk therapy. And to be candid, nothing ever really worked for her. I just don't think we had the research back then, and I don't really blame anybody. It just didn't work for her. My mother died a very depressed woman, unfortunately. I looked at her experience, and it was one of the reasons why I resisted therapy. I didn't go on any sort of antidepressant until after Carl had passed away, because my body was so out of sorts.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that this works, and the fact that the FDA is en route to approve it, that until it's approved, until it's available, I think it's really important to have voices that support the approval and give a patient's perspective versus a venture capitalist or a clinic, a patient's perspective as to what this therapy is, how it worked, what to expect, what to level set expectations. Because I get people who reach out to me and they're like, they want an MDMA journey tomorrow. And I'm like, look, that's not going to give you the best results. You need to kind of follow, in my opinion, follow the protocol of lots of talk therapy, know your intentions, know who you're going to work with. And that was my motivation. I like to say this. I like to say it this way because it's really is true. I had the privilege of going through this therapy. And if I didn't give back to be a voice, to in some way, shape, or form help other people who are also searching for a PTSD solution, then I don't know. That would have been awful. That would have been awful.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's perfectly understandable. If you've got a loved one that's suffering so badly and you've seen them go through treatments and all this other stuff and you don't see it helping, then yeah, why would you think that anything's going to help you? So, I mean, it makes perfect sense as to why you or anyone else would say, yeah, well, there's nothing out there that works, but it's nice that you have something and can share this because there's too many people that just say, well, this is my life now. This is what I have to deal with. And some can deal with it and others don't deal with it well. So yeah, I think that's phenomenal that you're doing all of this.
I mean, on average, when you look online, on average, 5 to 6% of the U.S. population has had or has PTSD at some point, because it doesn't always have to be from childhood. It can be from a traumatic incident. It can be veterans. It can be the death of a loved one. I mean, any sort of trauma that doesn't heal with any sort of empathetic witness or any other process. If it's PTSD diagnosis, this is a viable treatment for people to pursue, in my opinion.
Yeah. And since I'm a veteran myself, when I hear PTSD, that's exactly where my mind goes. You don't necessarily think about it, but there are all kinds of other things that can happen that can create. I mean, I lost my husband, but I never looked at any of it like PTSD, but I suppose that, some of that could be because it's triggers, certain things that will suddenly trigger you and you may not know why, but you just, go off. I think we all deal with that. Can you share some of the impacts and transformations that you've observed among those who engaged with your workbook or your YouTube channel?
I will. Okay, this makes me see that this fills me up. I've gotten a lot of feedback, obviously, about how raw the memoir is, how vulnerable. I've allowed people into an area of my life that my entire life was shut down because of shame. But the best, the thing that kind of keeps me going is that I actually had someone reach out to me and say that my story gave her hope that she can heal. I have a good number of people who have reached out with some horrific childhood experiences, and they freely share because they've read my book, and so they feel like they know me.
Sure. Yeah.
And to get the feedback from somebody that she thinks that I've given her hope. That's why I did this. That's why I did that. I should almost say, like, I could stop there, but no, I'm not going to stop there. But that
None of
was
us
the
really
goal.
want to stop there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the biggest piece of feedback. That's why I'm doing this, just to tell people there is another option and to present it in a way that's, nobody's going to go read a 25-page, be in a state of crisis and they're looking for information. And I'm hoping that the book, the YouTube, the workbook, in some way can kind of cut through the noise of their trauma and give them the answers that they're looking for. That's the goal.
And I think in the noise of all the negativity in the media and everything else, because it has kind of a bad, stigma, and everybody has their perceptions, but it's mostly because they're not educated. They don't know enough about it. They're just being shared with what that outlet wants to share with them. And it's a shame that people stay suffering because of stuff like that.
I would say be very aware of clickbait right now, because editors write headlines, journalists write the body. And I've seen at least 3 articles within the past 2 weeks alone where the headline did not in any way, shape, or form match the content, number one. Number two, yes, there's been a lot of stories over the years about psychedelics. And I would say to folks, pay really close attention to those stories. Is there a dose that's being talked about? Because usually some of the my so-and-so jumped off of so-and-so. Well, how much did so-and-so take? What else was in so-and-so's system? Was it a safe environment for that person? Were there any other diagnoses other than PTSD? There are a lot of questions that should be asked when we hear kind of these outlandish or these outrageous stories that are all about psychedelics, that if instead, like the same way that you wouldn't go take 5 times the recommended dosage for a painkiller, is the same way you shouldn't take 5 times the recommended dosage for a psychedelic. I laugh at that. I shouldn't laugh, but some of those outrageous stories are because people took crazy amounts of different things. So I would just say be a cautious consumer when some of that clickbait comes about, and just kind of question, do I have all the information that I would normally use to evaluate whether I should incorporate medicine into my health practice?
And know what to look for, because unfortunately we're in that day and age in society where once there's something that's big that's going on, someone jumps on the bandwagon and figures out how to capitalize on someone else's pain. Because, people, I guess I would say some people are, really desperate for that relief and that. And we have people out there that come up with clickbait scams, whatever, that, do that to people. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of, especially within this last week, a lot with the Veterans Association very much pushing for psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy research, because they're following the research around PTSD. And obviously, veterans, we know the situation there. And so I'm seeing, if you're looking at the right places, like the VA and different organizations that are working to make sure that this is research-based, then the information is correct. It's when, it's some blogger somewhere wanting clicks, that's when I start to question.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. So what role do you envision psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy, we will get that
very good,
playing in mainstream mental health treatment in the future?
Oh gosh, I'm not sure I'm qualified for that answer. I can tell you what I hope, but I can't tell you. It's totally just my opinion.
Well, sure. No, but yeah. Or what is your, okay, that's fine. What is your hope? How would you like to envision seeing how it goes?
My hope is that people have available to them the level of therapeutic support that I had. And that means that there is a wealth of trained psychedelic-assisted psychotherapists, because right now I know MAPS.org is working with a couple of other organizations to train people in this modality, so that I'm hopeful that there would be a large population of qualified individuals to work with people. I want guidelines in place, because when you are in an enhanced state, you are very susceptible. And so there should be guidelines in terms of who is there with a journey, what the dosages are, what the expectations are, the talk therapy component. I mean, right now the research is so new, and lots of other companies are creating other research studies. So there's, how much psychotherapy do you need? How much this, how much that? And I don't even begin to know any of those correct answers per se, other than the fact that at least the supports need to be there. We need to have the scaffolding of qualified people, really safe environments, proper dosages, and at this point, the scaffolding before and after of the psychotherapy. And as more research comes out, sure, we can navigate and move around. But ultimately, it's really important to me that moving forward, that this becomes more available to more and more people. And that requires training, and that requires guidelines. And I'm hopeful that we'll get there. I mean, I really do think we'll get there. I have no idea what the timeline is. Right now, the goal is FDA approval, DEA rescheduling MDMA so that it can be prescribed, and then the states determining how it's going to run in their states. So
Yeah.
we have a couple of steps to get through, and then I think as we're going through those steps, we're going to see even more research coming out to refine the different processes. So I mean, ultimately, if I had had this therapy available to me when I was in my 20s, I can candidly say to you that my life probably would have been extremely different. So it's my hope that it becomes more widely available for people. Absolutely.
So when you went through the therapy, did you go through the therapy in the States, or?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
I know you mentioned underground, but I didn't know if it was in the States, because there's a lot of people that wind up flying out to other countries because they can do stuff in other countries that we can't yet. That's why medical tourism is normally up.
And I'll be candid with you, depending on who you're working with out of country, that can be an incredible healing experience. That's why I wrote the workbook, because you and I both know that there are lots of flights heading to different parts of the world right now for people to do these healing journeys. And a lot of these facilities have marvelous programs, and some of them don't. That's why I wrote the workbook, to at least give people kind of the beginning guidelines so they can start to make decisions now, if they're not ready to wait for the FDA approval, DEA, state. I think we're obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, we've got some time until it's completely ready in the US.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. But you said in 2024, though, it's looking fairly hopeful.
For approval.
Right?
Approval versus like, hey, it's available for patients. I think there's a little bit of a lag there.
Not a red tape.
Hopefully not. I'd love to be wrong. I'm the first one. I would love to be wrong with that. Yeah, I think the red tape is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, red tape. That's kind of normal around here. So, and of course, each country has their own, their own restrictions and stuff. But yeah, everybody's different.
Well, there are some beautiful retreats. I mean, one of the things, when you do a little bit of searching, you can find a bunch of celebrities who are talking about different retreats that they've had just some amazing experiences. And so I will just caution that my level of trauma, I'm deeply thankful I had a therapist and a guide that worked with me for a whole year. And if somebody is going the retreat route, again, don't necessarily expect everything to be healed after just one experience at a retreat, regardless of how many journeys might be offered over like a weekend or a week. Integration is really vital. At least that's what I found.
Right. And finding people that you feel like you can trust, I would imagine too, because that, like you said, that's a very, makes you very susceptible, and it's a sensitive time. So you definitely want people around you can trust and rely on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, your subconscious is kind of just wide open. So
Yeah.
yeah, super
So
important.
your book there is your website, thejourneysage.com. Is that the best place for them to go, or is it on Amazon? How do we?
Yeah, super easy. JourneySage.com is my website, and that there I have some sample chapters of the workbook. I have 8 different prompts to help people create intentions. I have available for anybody to download the body prompt. That was the prompt where my therapist said to me, "Let's talk to your body. What's your body say?" I know I keep doing this. So we used that one the most. I made that one available for everybody. So go ahead and grab that off the website. There's no sign up. I'm not doing any marketing or, anything of that sort.
Mhm.
And then more questions. Those are usually answered over at the YouTube channel, but I also have a little form. People are free to reach out to me. And yeah, the books are on Amazon. And I know that as we get closer to FDA approval, we're going to see more and more in the media about MDMA therapy for PTSD. So I assume that I'll start getting a lot more questions.
So when you get the questions and stuff, is that how you're forming more new short videos and stuff to kind of address each question, and so that all goes up on your YouTube channel?
That's exactly right. I've got long form, 5 to 7 minutes for kind of deeper dives, and I've just started doing the shorts, which are so much fun because I go down, I walk in the park, and I have a little camera, and I'm just kind of like teaching to the camera. So that's exactly what's happening when people are asking me questions, or they're like, "Jill, I get it from the book, but what did you really mean by XYZ?" So yeah, that's how I'm creating the shorts right now. I already went through it. The goal is to help other people understand what it's like.
I'm glad you've got to the fun level with shorts. I haven't got there yet. It's probably my own PTSD right there, not to make fun of it, but like, it's just like, wow.
Well, set and setting, I have a lovely park. Like if I was doing it in my house, it might be kind of boring, but I have a
Oh no, I
beautiful
go
park like
outside
3
by my
blocks.
trees where I'm blowing in the breeze and everything else. It's just the thing of having to look at myself while I'm talking. I'm like, seriously?
You don't have to. You can be looking at we can talk. We can talk.
We'll talk. Yeah, we'll
We'll
talk.
talk. We'll talk.
Oh my. So what are some things, or what are the most important things you want people to take away from this and to know about all of?
Psychedelics are not what we've been told they are for decades. I was a child of the 80s. I had a completely different view about psychedelics, and it was because the research was stopped. There are a lot of books out there talking about the drug wars and how the research was out there, and then the research just kind of got hidden and stopped and all that kind of stuff. Psychedelics are not what you think they are. And if me saying that sentence to you kind of triggers you, like, well, I know what they are, I would say I would really encourage you to do some reading. MAPS.org has the FDA breakthrough designation for MDMA. Johns Hopkins has the FDA breakthrough designation for psilocybin magic mushrooms for depression. So the FDA is looking at these compounds. There is a bevy. There are just a ton of companies right now that are running their own clinical trials, trying to figure out, do you really need to make a therapeutic journey 8 hours? Can we shorten it? Like there's lots of research going on. So if you have this kind of immediate response like, no, psychedelics are bad, I would encourage you to kind of say, hey, wait a minute, let me take a look around. If you have someone in your life who is suffering from PTSD or depression, there's a lot of research about psilocybin magic mushrooms for end-of-life patients and releasing that anxiety. There's a lot that can be good to increase our joy and comfort in life with some of these healing modalities that we don't even know yet. And so that's what I would just encourage people to have: an open mind, do some additional reading, make sure it's, research based at qualified institutions, not, the blogger down the street or someone who Facebook that just kind of told you about something. And
Right.
if we're all kind of a little bit more open to this healing modality, we can see tremendous healing growth moving forward in years, decades. That's my hope. That's really my hope.
Yeah, I was glad you mentioned that, because I was going to say, I know we've talked a lot about PTSD, but you also had mentioned depression or end of life, because I was wondering, what else have you seen psychedelics being used for? I mean,
Yeah,
because we're talking
yeah.
about for healing and helping people, not just for recreational just because we want a different feeling for the heck of it. It's to heal
Right.
people.
Oh, absolutely. I don't even think I would be able to do a psychedelic recreationally anymore. I'm so fascinated about how my brain works and what my brain wants to tell me. So I don't even think I could just do it for fun anymore, or at any point, I should say. Um, PTSD, anxiety, I'm kind of going through my head the different things. Alcoholism. There's a lot of research out there about psilocybin and alcoholism or addiction in general. I mean, research studies, clinical research costs millions and millions and millions of dollars.
Oh,
And
yeah.
there are people investing in those clinical research trials in the US, the UK, in the world. I mean, Australia has already approved MDMA for PTSD therapy. They did that this summer. So this isn't how do I say this? This isn't like a one-shot thing. Like there's lots of studies going on, lots of focus on this. It just isn't, if you're not following it the way I am, it might not feel that way. But like, I think CBS just did a segment on it. I think ABC just did a segment on microdosing. Like if you do a Google search, you'll find some really recent big media outlet coverage of psychedelics. And then if you dive even deeper, maps.org, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, you'll find even more.
Right. And that's what I do. And I was so glad when we met and you and I got to talk about this because it's something I've heard here and there. But when I heard psychedelics, I think of like the 70s, flower child. Like I said, they all have their their stigma and everybody, what they used to do back in the 70s. But this is,
Right.
This is totally different. Either that or what we were talking, things you see on TV, like used for ecstasy. So that's kind of what you relate the MDMA. So I was so glad to find you. And so we could all learn a little bit more about what that can do. What is on the horizons for you? Where you go next? I mean, with this, are you just going to keep building with the YouTube channel? You got anything else planned on how to expand this?
Well, ultimately, so I am having a little too much fun with YouTube right now, to be honest. So, I have too many ideas and not enough computer memory to hold all of my videos. So I am working through that. I think the ultimate goal is to be able to speak with up and coming practitioners and probably to speak at like some medical conferences for practitioners who are studying to be a psychedelic assisted psychotherapist or people who are just interested in it, hearing about it from a patient's perspective, what the protocol was that I was involved in, how I experienced it, so that when they are moving into their practice, they can have an idea, at least one patient idea of how it really worked. Because I dive into it in the book. It's literally, very little hindsight 2020. I kind of lead you through the whole thing and you get to see how my mind totally had some blinders. And so I think that's kind of the next step, that as this gets closer to legalization or approval and closer to being a healing modality, I think we're going to have a lot of practitioners interested in the patient's perspective. And I think that's where I come in. But I'm voicing it out to the universe.
Maybe even a TED Talk is in your future.
Well, I actually did a TED Talk and they would not approve it. They would not show it because the therapy is not FDA approved. So Ted, if you're listening, when it becomes FDA approved, maybe you'll go into your archives and release my TED Talk.
There you go. Absolutely. Well, we are almost out of time. Jill, I want to thank you for taking the time and sharing all that wonderful information. Again, go to her YouTube channel. She's got all the videos, a lot of great information. And thank you for bringing that insight and education to everybody about that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for allowing me to chat about this. We had talked about your experience as a veteran and, being able to share this healing modality with joint populations, people with child abuse, veterans.
Yeah. A lot of people that I think need help or need support to get better and not to have to say, this is my life. But we are out of time for this week, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Do remember also to go to the YouTube channel at Mindful Mondays with Laura Cross, because just like Jill, we have a lot of other awesome guests to cover all different realms of mindfulness. So I want to thank everyone and for joining us, and we will see you next week.